Now I want to talk about it to a little bit more of a tactical way, and we'll talk about it from an economic standpoint of your money. Now, when you think about it, as I kind of set up in the very beginning from a philosophical level, that I have to expend my life source, my life's energy, in order to acquire the property, money. Money is where I could store that energy so I could use it later. So let's say that I work those extra 4 hours digging that hole. I get the money, I can save that money, so tomorrow I don't have to work 4 hours. I can then deploy that money to get the resources that I need. And so that's the way that you can look at money, like a stored source of value, a stored source of energy. But what happens is, as you're probably well aware, at least if you tune into my show on a regular basis, is that when they inflate the money supply, when they increase more money, that means the existing money buys less goods and services. So when you see prices going up, it's not that prices are going up. It's that the value, the purchasing power of the dollars have gone down, so it takes more dollars to buy those. So the reason why this is important to understand is because if I put $100,000 in the bank account 10 years ago, I was going to buy a house 10 years ago, but I thought the market's going to crash, so I'll put the $100,000 in the bank, and now 10 years later, I want to deploy those $100,000 to buy a house. But the problem is it will buy me about half of the house that would have bought me before. I still have the same 100,000 currency units, but the value of those currency units have been stolen away by the money printer, which is theft. So when you think about that, through inflation, through money printing, they're stealing the value directly from my bank without taking my currency units. They just take the value away. But it's a way that they actually steal my life. So for example, you hear about inflation. It's come back down a little bit. It's down to about, I think the latest reading shows 3.2%, up a little bit from the last reading. But to put this into perspective, what does that mean? That means they want to steal only 3% of your life per year. Now, the Fed's target is 2%, so they only want to steal 2% of your life per year. So, only 10% of your life over 5 years. No big deal, right? Well, if we put that into some calculations, think about it at 8% inflation. This is the last time I ran the calculations, but just for illustration purposes, at 8% inflation, that puts the average income earner in the United States, that increases their cost by about $324 a month, just to have the same quality of life they had before. So with the quality of life you had today, how many times you go out to eat, how much clothes you buy, if you're eating steak or whatever it is, to maintain that same quality of life, it went up by $324. Well, if you make $32 an hour, that means you now have to work 10 hours more just to have the exact same quality of life that you had the month before. Now, when I talk about stealing your life, it's because that's 10 extra hours you have to work to have that same quality of life. And that's 10 extra hours of your life that you could spend in a way that you see fit, to learn a new skill, to start a new business, to spend time with your wife so you have a good relationship, or with your kids so you have a good relationship, or in the gym for your own health, or whatever it may be. It's your life. You should be able to spend it as you see fit. But now the government has stolen that from you, because now you're forced to work those extra hours just to maintain the quality of life. Now, you could not work those extra hours and then you could just have a lower quality of life. Either way, your life has been stolen. I don't have the data in front of me. I've used it many times, but you can see like the average hours of work it required to buy the median home in 1970 versus the average hours of work it takes to buy the median home today, the car, et cetera, one share of the Dow, et cetera. And over, you can see that your life is literally being stolen. Now, it hasn't always been the case. As a matter of fact, these taxes aren't super new. Now, of course, if you understand how America was founded, you know that, of course, taxes have always been part of the rub, right? There's the great Boston Tea Party, where the United States revolted against paying taxes to Britain. They didn't want to pay no taxation without representation. The amount of taxes they paid were minuscule compared to what we paid today. But really where taxes really got their hold, we saw them in the Civil War in the 1860s. They imposed a tax, a 3% income tax for the war, and then after the war was over, they dropped it. But really where the income taxes got ratified was in 1913. And what's important to understand about 1913 is why. What else happened in 1913? Well, we saw the creation of both the IRS and the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, gold had been money for all of history, and now the Federal Reserve wanted to create fake paper, counterfeit money out of thin air. But why the heck would anybody want to use fake paper money? Like, imagine today someone says, hey, you should start using this monopoly money. Here you're like, no, why would I use monopoly money? I'm not going to do that. And that's exactly what happened. The Federal Reserve said, hey, we printed this fake monopoly money. Everyone should use it. And everyone's like, well, we ain't going to use that. So, of course, they had to come up with a reason. How could we get people to use it? Someone had a bright idea. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create the Federal Reserve, and we're also going to create the IRS at the same time. And here's what we'll do. Since nobody wants to use this fake counterfeit paper money, monopoly money, what we'll do is we'll create the IRS, and now you have to work all year collecting that fake money so you can send it back to us at the end of the year. That's a good idea. So we saw the IRS and the Fed put into act at the same time. Now, this is why you hear a lot of times something like with Bitcoin, where they're like, well, Bitcoin's not ever going to make it because we can't pay our taxes in Bitcoin. And that's where it goes back to, really the creation of that. Now, I have seen a few states, I believe Colorado, I want to say maybe Arizona. There's a handful of states that are now allowing you to pay your taxes in Bitcoin. But anyway, I don't want to go down that path. But we can see over and over this is happening. And of course, this is part of what's known as Keynesian economics, and really more today, it's more pervasive in what's known as the modern monetary theory. In modern monetary theory, theorists believe they could just print an unlimited amount of money, which to most of us go, but wouldn't that create a lot of inflation? And they look at it sort of like, think about the money supply as like a bathtub, where they could print as much money as they want, and if the water level or if the monetary level starts getting too high, then they pull the plug at the bottom, which is the taxes. And then they can just tax the money out of the system, and they can fill it back up, and they can tax it back out. And somehow they think they can control the entire economy by printing as much money as they want and then just imposing taxes arbitrarily. Of course, we have hundreds of years of facts that show that doesn't work. As a matter of fact, there's been studies that show that regardless of what the tax rate is, whether it's 2%, 5%, or 50%, the percentage of revenue compared to GDP that the government receives is always about the same. And the reason why is because incentives. Here in California, we have legalized marijuana, and they thought it would be a good idea to legalize it, and we'll just tax it, and that way it'll be a massive extra revenue source for the government. The problem is that they got greedy, and they put a massive tax on it. Now, I don't work in that industry, so I don't have the exact data, but they have put a very, very, very large tax on it. So large, in fact, that most of the people involved in the legal marijuana trade business can't make a profit. So something like 60% of the marijuana in California is still being sold black market. So if the state would have said, hey, we'll just give like a more modest tax rate of whatever, 5 or 10%, they would probably take a much larger share of the revenue coming in because everybody would gladly pay 5 or 10% to be perfectly legal. But at 60%, I'll take my chances. I'll just go black market. And so we can see over and over and over again, the more that they do that, the more that they try to steal your life, either through money printing or through taxation, the more people revolt and how much it backfires on them. Now, of course, it depends, I guess, on which side of the aisle you're on, whether you're looking at inflation good or bad. At the end of the day, what is good or bad? Unfortunately, I think most people today look at good as something that helps them personally, as opposed to like the greater good. I like to think of good or bad as good being something that takes me closer to my goals and bad being something that takes me further away from my goals. But again, when we think about it from the world, it shouldn't be your personal goals. It should be a global goal. And we can see that if we allowed people to have more of their life, we allowed them to build into their own life, their families, their relationships, their health, the world will be a better place. So I don't support the government stealing our lives. But what do you think? I'd love to hear from you. Hit me up on social media at @1MarkMoss. Let me know. Leave a comment off if you're listening on the podcast. Let me know what you think so I can continue to bring more content like this to you. But that's what I got today. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.